My greatest desire was to see Nigeria being able to replicate exactly what you achieved. And that's been very, very difficult because people say, oh, it's easy to transfer knowledge. We've had a lot of people come to learn and study under your feet, but somehow it's hard. If you want to advise the Nigerian government, because football is the greatest unifier, and beyond that is a $5 billion industry in Nigeria if it is well harnessed. If you want to advise the Nigerian government and the entire stakeholders and the fan base of Nigeria, what can they learn from Dein and what can they learn from the Premier League?
Yeah, well, everything always starts with the grassroots. You've got to be able to develop talent. Now, Nigeria is a wonderful production because everybody loves football, and you've got the basic talent there. It's got to be harnessed. So every club has got to have a good academy, and the first thing you've got to have is good coaches. So you've got to improve the coaches. I know Arsene Wenger today, he said, I was with him, he's in London actually at the moment. I had lunch with him the other day, and I said to him, what do you want your legacy to be? He said two things, because he's now, as you know, head of global development for football, for FIFA, for the world. And I said, what do you want your legacy to be? He said two things. One, he said, I want to see more boys and girls playing football. And two, I want to see better coaches coaching them. Right? And that's exactly what's got to happen in Nigeria. You've got to encourage the youngsters to play the game, and you've got to have better coaches. Then you've got to be able to have the investment into the stadia to make sure you've got the facilities right. And you know, this takes place, and I know when Pinnick was the president of the Nigerian FA, that was his goal. He's a very good guy. He was very determined to try and improve Nigerian football. And you've got the opportunity there because you've got such a big population. It's right, and you've got the talent. It is exciting. You know, when I was at Arsenal, I always made sure we had talent scouts, particularly in West Africa, because they're the fertile grounds. Nigeria, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Cameroon. That's, you know, that's where Ghana, where you've got great talent coming through.
Yeah, there's a whole buffet of who you are. There's Dein, the football man, the businessman, the family man. In 2022, we're in an era where you find it very difficult to keep a marriage for 2 years or 5 years. It's almost impossible now to have a marriage. What's the secret to you having a marriage that have lasted so long?
You're talking about my personal marriage?
Yes, your personal marriage.
Ah, that's good. Well, I've been married. I celebrated my 50th anniversary in August, so that's a long time.
Yeah.
No, and I think it's always the same. It's compromise. It's give and take, and it's the same in anything in a relationship. You've got to understand your partner. You've got to be able to communicate well. Communication is always the key word. Edafe. You've got to understand your partner.
And as a father of two, when you look back now, when you sit your kids down, the boy...
I'm a father of 3 and a grandfather of 8.
Whoa, okay, so a father of 3, I'm sorry. When you sit your kids down, I mean, Richard Branson was asked, why is it that your children live a different kind of lifestyle from you? And he said his answer was, I'm a poor man's child and they are a billionaire's child. When you sit with your children and your grandchildren, what's the ultimate advice you give to them?
I always used to say to them, I want you to have a good time, enjoy yourself, have fun, do well in life, just try not to embarrass me along the way. If anything, I probably embarrass them more than they've embarrassed me.
I don't think if I have you for a father, I don't think that I can point anything that represents embarrassment. So let's look at this. You brought Arsene Wenger to Arsenal. You changed the English game to the Premier League. You brought Arsenal from, you know, what it used to be to this Arsenal. But beyond that, you spent the least amount of money ever by any club chairman, president, or vice chairman to make a team go unbeaten. The most expensive player in that unbeaten team was £9.5 million pounds, Thierry Henry from Juventus to Arsenal. How did you manage to do it? And I know you said something about Gilberto Silva explaining to you how the players were nodding from one player to the other. While that is good aesthetically, I also think that you need to tell me something way, way more than that, deeper than that. I'm a football man, so I need to hear something more than that.
Well, Edafe, do you think CocaCola will give you the secret of their formula?
That's not fair. That's not fair. I'm an Arsenal man. I deserve to know.
It comes to one word, and that is judgment. So when Arsene Wenger and we used to have a look at a player, and we would decide, and invariably it wasn't a well-known player. We would always, when we were thinking of, Thierry Henry wasn't particularly known, Manu Petit, when you think of Nicolas Anelka, bringing him through, right? So it's one word, it's called judgment.
Yeah. And I guess you mean absolute good judgment of it. But then there's something that happened with Arsenal. You left in 2007, and from that very moment when you left, our transfers begin to peter down. There was delay, there were times. Do you think that the biggest mistake of the later years of the Wenger era was the fact that they did not replace David?
Well, certainly, it's not for me to say that, Edafe, but one thing is certain, that Arsene and I had a very, very special relationship. It was based on knowledge, on trust, on friendship, and we always invariably felt the same. If we were going for a player, we would both write down, we had this little ritual, that if we were going to buy a player, we would both put down on a piece of paper what we thought he was worth. And then we would open it up together, and we would never be more than 5% difference.
Wow.
In our thinking. But we were always on the same wavelength.
You brought Wenger to Arsenal. You also brought Wenger and Eriksson from Lazio, I think, to the English team. England were in 17th place when you brought him, and then you became 4th in the world when he left. Which of these two decisions would you consider your biggest success?
I think they were both successful in their own right. They were both very different. It's one thing, looking after a national team. It's another thing looking after a domestic team, a domestic club, where you've got 50, 60 games a season to look after. An international manager may have less than a dozen games a season. So it's different, but both are very, very important. But on a daily basis, certainly when you think of what Arsene achieved at Arsenal in 22 years at the club, you won't see that again. The average length of time a manager is in a job today in the 92 professional clubs in England is 12 months.
Wow.
Right? Look at Steve Gerrard last week, got released from Aston Villa. So, every couple of months there's another manager leaving. So you don't get that longevity, because the new breed of owners want immediate success. They expect it, and it doesn't work that way. It takes time for a team to evolve. When you look at our famous Invincibles, that team really took a couple of years to come together. And when it did, it was poetry in motion. That will, as long as football is written about, you will always talk about the Invincibles for what they did, because that was just pure poetry in motion.
You're absolutely correct, David. And I need to know from a man who is an erudite businessman, and in your book, Calling the Shot, there is a part of the book that talked about you being defrauded, and you kept that to yourself for 40 years. You never mentioned it. You were going through all the motions of life, dealing with family's issue, dealing with everything, losing your brother, but you never mentioned it, and then you finally decide to mention it. Just a snippet. How did that happen?
Okay, well, you really have to recall the details, the graphic details, and it was something which was, and to this day I still carry a very big wound about that. But I never like talking about negatives, and this happened 40 years ago, don't forget. And I hadn't told a soul about it, but I had two wonderful ghostwriters in Amy Lawrence and Henry Winter. Amy Lawrence had written a book called The Invincibles herself, and she did a book on the '89 team. Henry Winter, as you know, writes for the Times, is a very prolific, very respected writer. And both of them laid the ground rules down. They said, if we're going to help you with your book, you've got to tell everything. Whatever's happening in your life, you've got to be prepared to bare your soul, because otherwise it's not a proper autobiography. It's got to come, everything, good, bad, or indifferent, it's got to come out. So that was difficult for me because there were a lot of personal aspects of it. You know, my growing up life, my business life, my reversal. Everybody has reversals. Everybody has a reversal. You know, you talk about anybody who has been Elon Musk or somewhere, right? Or you talk about Alan Sugar and everybody's had reversals. Jeff Bezos, anybody who's been successful. And I've had a reversal or two, but you have to deal with them. It's how you pick yourself up from that reversal. And that is very well documented in the book. And I'm afraid it happened actually because I was trading sugar in Nigeria, and the guy I was trading with very sadly defrauded me, and it nearly ruined me. But I had to pick myself up and continue. And it was just at the time when I was buying into Arsenal. So it was a very sensitive time of my life. But I had to hold my head up high and really push to make sure that I could survive.
Thank God you survived, because your survivor meant that we have the Premier League today, we have Arsenal. But then there is an Arsenal question that I want to ask. When Arsenal won the title in '89 at Anfield, with a young captain, Tony Adams at the time, and when you sign a player that is regarded as finished in Wright, and he became a record goal scorer, and when you brought Arsene Wenger, the one that is regarded as Arsene Who, which of these three moments would you classify on your top number one highest moment? Because going to Anfield to score 2 goals and winning the title for me was incredible. Okay, and then the following season Leeds United won it, but then turning and Wright, a Sunday player that really did have a good grassroots story, turning that guy into a club legend is also amazing. But then Arsene Wenger, which would you put at the top of your food chain?
They're different. They're very different, and both helped in their own way to change Arsenal. And in fact, when I consider, the players that we brought in over the years, and you talk about Ian Wright, certainly he would, because of his personality, he was an extrovert, he loved the game, he would play with a smile, he's just a happy soul. And now he's gone on to have such a successful career in broadcasting. And I'm honoured to say he's still one of my close friends today. We see each other regularly. I love him dearly. He's like one of my sons. And I always used to say that about my team. Whenever I signed a player, I adopted them into my family. They were part of my own extension of my own family. Even though I've only got 3 children, right? I really had every player I felt was an extension to me. And I made sure that I knew everything about them. I knew their wives, I knew their girlfriends, sometimes I knew both. And they were all special to me. And I wanted to know if everything was all right with them. So signing Ian Wright was a very big step for Arsenal. And then obviously bringing in Arsene changed the Arsenal culture and changed football in general in England, perhaps in Europe, maybe around the world, because of his techniques in training, in diet, and the way he managed. He was an unusual manager. Don't forget, he was an ex-footballer, he was a footballer, but you find a lot of ex-footballers, they just leave and they go straight into management. He actually went to university, he had a good education, he had a degree in economics, he studied medicine, he understood the philosophy of players, psychology. He was a very highly intelligent guy. So he changed the aspect of football in this country dramatically. And players extended their careers because of him.
And finally, before I let you go, I promised you it was going to be for 30 minutes or so, so let me keep my promise. And I'm hoping that you would adopt me as one of your sons as well. But one player that Arsenal signed that for me was the game changer, just the way Arsene Wenger was the game changer, is Dennis Bergkamp. But let's not forget that before signing Dennis Bergkamp, there was a time where he was seen as a bad guy. Dennis the menace, he was rough, he was picking the red card, he was, the non-flying Dutchman. How did you convince Dennis Bergkamp, a player of that stature, to come play for a club that is renowned for booze, alcohol, and the rest? How did you convince Dennis Bergkamp? Because I heard from a birthday that it was your decision.
Yeah, well, in fact, this was before Arsene Wenger. This was in 1994, don't forget.
Yeah,
Arsene
I know.
6. And Dennis joined at the same time, really, as David Platt, you may remember. So Dennis also came in the same club from Canu. He came from Inter Milan. And I went over there, I met him, and I met his coach, his agent. We had discussions, and he decided he was ready for a challenge. He was ready to join Inter Milan. I don't think he'd settled down well. And of course, he had this wonderful training upbringing, as Canu did. They both shared the same thing with Ajax. They both actually learned their trade in football really in Ajax. So we've got to thank Ajax a little bit for developing both their careers, both Canu and Dennis. And if you ask both of them, they will tell you that. They were instrumental in that. So yes, it took a bit of persuasion to bring them both over to Arsenal, but I'm delighted we did, because they both enhanced Arsenal greatly.
All right, thank you very much, David, for sharing your time. And for you guys that are listening or watching out there, you can get this book on Apple Store, the audio or the hardback. You can order anywhere and it will come to you. Calling the shot. You have to learn how to call the shot in life, in business, and also how to deal with everything. I say David Dein is a man who bled yet led very well from the front, across all front. Thank you very much for your time on the show today.
Duffy, thank you very much.
Wow, that is David Dein, the former vice chairman of Arsenal, as well as the former vice chairman of the English Football Association, a man who sat on many boards across Europe, UEFA and FIFA, and did incredibly well at doing all of them. What I would have to say to you is that when you live your life in such a way that the landmark of achievement that you spew out there would outlive you and would also help to change and define a lot of people's life. Thank you very much, Mr. David Dein, for giving us your time, for being on the show. I want to say massive thank you to all of his team that made this happen, and Amaju Bevin Pinnick for leaving the hospital and say to me, you have troubled me for 4 years about this David Dein thing. Let me go to his house and go and put a call through. Because of Amaju Pinnick, I now have his direct phone number, and I had to cut past all the red tapes that are available. God bless everybody who made this happen. Special thank must go to our producer Ahmed Kalejaye for being available to make it happen. Thank you so much. God bless you, and God bless you all for always trusting Elegbata TV and radio to bring you the very best. For those of you who came in late, this interview will be available on our YouTube channel. Just subscribe to the YouTube channel, Elegbata TV Sports, and we would have fun all the time. Don't forget to tell a friend that something good is going on at Elegbata TV Sports, the YouTube channel, and subscribe and always engage us on our conversation. Currently, we're running an identifier shot where we put in a player and we'll ask you to name the player across all social media platforms, on Twitter, Facebook, on Instagram, and on the YouTube channel. Please engage with us as we try to grow. God bless you and have for yourself a wonderful day. Once again, my name is Idafi Matthew Segane. You love to come in the Elegbata on the spot. Bye bye.
You are listening to Elegbata TV Radio.